On Christmas Eve, while the entire town was sheltering from a deadly blizzard, an old biker continued his journey. He wasn't a hero, he was dirt poor, injured, and just trying to get home. But his dog suddenly stopped him. On the icy road, behind the flickering Christmas lights, an old house stood silently. No warmth, no footprints, no answers. Inside were two elderly people who had begun to lose consciousness. No signal, no one to help. On the harshest winter night of the year, a man, a dog, and a choice would decide who would survive Christmas. Pine Ridge was a small town in northern Montana. It had one main road, a gas station, a grocery store, and rows of old houses built when winters were shorter and people were tougher. By Christmas Eve, the town was nearly silent. Most businesses had closed early. People stayed indoors, windows glowing softly behind curtains. That night, the weather was severe. Snow fell heavily and did not stop. Wind pushed the snow across the streets, covering tire tracks within minutes. The temperature was far below freezing. Roads were dangerous, and local authorities had already warned people not to travel unless necessary. Snowplows had stopped running because visibility was too poor. Christmas lights were still hanging on houses, but many blinked weakly or were half covered by snow. Decorations looked frozen in place. The town felt cut off from the rest of the world. Mike Carter was riding through it anyway. Mike was 47 years old. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and physically strong, though his movements were slower than they had been years ago. His face showed signs of long outdoor work. Dry skin, lines around the eyes, and a short beard turning gray. His hair was cut short. His eyes were light blue and often looked tired. Mike wore a black leather jacket that had been repaired many times. The sleeves were worn thin at the elbows. Underneath, he wore layered thermal shirts. His jeans were old, and his boots were heavy with snow. There was nothing flashy about him. He looked like a working man. Mike rode an old Harley-Davidson motorcycle. The engine was loud but steady. The bike had scratches and dents, signs of years of use. It was reliable, even in bad weather. Behind him, secured in a reinforced carrier, sat his dog. The dog's name was Rusty. Rusty was a mixed-breed dog, medium-sized, with golden-brown fur and a white patch on his chest. His muzzle was beginning to gray, and his eyes were dark and alert. He wore a red Christmas collar with a metal tag. Rusty was calm, observant, and loyal. He had been with Mike for several years, ever since Mike adopted him from an animal shelter. Rusty sat still despite the cold. He trusted Mike completely. Mike had just finished a job repairing a broken heater in a trailer outside town. The customer could not afford much. Mike accepted what little money was offered and left without complaint. That money would help pay for medication Mike needed for old injuries and anxiety from his military service. Mike had served overseas many years ago. He rarely talked about it. Some nights he slept poorly, some days his breathing hurt. His left knee ached constantly from an injury that never healed properly. He worked when he could and rested when his body forced him to. He was not angry at the world. He was simply trying to get through it. As Mike rode north, the town disappeared behind him. Houses became fewer. Tall pine trees lined both sides of the road. Snow clung to branches and fell in thick sheets. The road narrowed, and the painted lines were barely visible. Rusty suddenly shifted. Mike felt it right away. Rusty leaned forward, his body tense. His ears lifted, and he sniffed the air. "What is it?" Mike asked quietly. Rusty made a low sound and stared toward the right side of the road. Mike slowed the motorcycle. His eyes followed Rusty's gaze. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed a faint glow in the distance. Small points of red and green light blinked through the snow. Christmas lights. Mike pulled the motorcycle to the side of the road and turned off the engine. The wind was loud now, biting through his clothes as he removed his helmet. The lights came from a narrow road almost hidden by snow. It looked rarely used. Snowbanks covered most of it. Rusty barked once and looked at Mike. Mike hesitated. It was late. The storm was getting worse. He could keep riding and be home in 30 minutes. There was no reason for him to stop, but something felt wrong. Mike had learned to trust that feeling. "All right," he said. "We'll check." He restarted the motorcycle and carefully turned onto the side road. The tires slipped several times, but Mike kept control. After a short distance, the trees opened into a clearing. A small wooden house stood there. It was old and poorly maintained. Snow covered the roof heavily. The porch leaned slightly. Christmas lights were hung along the railing, some working, others broken. A wreath hung unevenly on the front door. The house looked decorated for Christmas, but it did not look warm. Mike shut off the engine and stepped down. Rusty jumped out and walked toward the porch, then stopped. Mike noticed something immediately. There were no footprints in the snow, no tracks leading to the door, no signs that anyone had been outside recently. Mike walked up the porch steps and knocked firmly. "Hello?" he called. No response. Rusty sniffed under the door and began to whine. He scratched at the wood with his paw. Mike tried the door handle. It was locked. He looked through the small window beside the door. The glass was cold and clear. Inside, the house was dark, no lights, no movement. Mike felt tension build in his chest. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. Rusty barked again, louder this time. Mike stepped back and braced his shoulder against the door. He hit it hard. The wood cracked slightly, but did not open. He hit it again. The door broke open. Cold air rushed out from inside the house, colder than the air outside. It was the kind of cold that came from a place without heat for a long time. Mike stood still for a moment, looking into the dark interior. Rusty stepped inside first. Mike followed. The inside of the house was darker than Mike expected. The door creaked as it opened fully, and cold air moved around his legs. The smell inside was stale. There was no smoke, no warmth, no sound of running electricity. Mike stood just inside the doorway for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. "Hello?" he called again. No answer. Rusty moved ahead slowly, paws quiet on the wooden floor. His tail was low, not fearful, but alert. He stopped near the living room and looked back at Mike, then toward the far side of the house. Mike stepped inside and closed the door part way behind him to block the wind. Even with the door closed, the cold inside felt worse than outside. That worried him. The living room was small and crowded with old furniture. A couch with faded fabric sat against one wall. A coffee table held a stack of unopened mail and a half-written Christmas card. A small artificial Christmas tree stood near the window, unlit, dusted with snow that had blown in through a cracked frame. Mike's eyes went to the thermostat on the wall. It was dark. He touched it with his glove, then with his bare fingers. It was cold to the touch. He followed the wall toward the hallway. That was when he saw the man. An elderly man sat slumped in a recliner near the corner of the room. His head was tilted to one side. His eyes were half open but unfocused. His skin looked pale, almost gray. Mike moved fast. "Sir," he said firmly, "can you hear me?" The man did not respond. Mike knelt beside him and checked his breathing. It was shallow and uneven. The man's chest rose slowly, then paused too long before the next breath. Rusty stepped closer and pressed his body against the man's legs, adding what warmth he could. Mike noticed the man's hands. They were stiff and cold. His fingers were slightly blue. Mike looked around quickly. "Anyone else here?" he called out. From somewhere deeper in the house came a weak sound. Mike followed it down the hallway. The hallway was narrow and dark. One door was closed. Another stood open, leading to a small bedroom. On the floor near the bed lay an elderly woman. She was curled on her side, wrapped in a thin blanket that was not enough. Her face was tight with pain. One hand clutched her chest. Her breathing was fast and shallow. Mike knelt beside her. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "my name is Mike. I'm here to help." Her eyes opened slightly. She looked at him with confusion and fear. "George?" she whispered. Mike shook his head gently. "No, ma'am. I found your house. You're very cold. We need to help you." Rusty came up behind Mike and lay down near the woman's legs, close but not touching. He stayed still, calm. The woman's breathing slowed a little. Mike looked between the two of them and understood the situation clearly now. They had been without heat for hours, possibly longer. Mike went back to the living room and knelt by the old man again. "Sir," he said louder, "you need to stay awake." The man's eyes moved slightly. "Evelyn?" the man said weakly. "She's here," Mike replied. "She's alive." The man nodded faintly, then coughed. The sound was wet and deep. That concerned Mike. Mike stood and scanned the room quickly. He needed to get heat into the house, even temporary heat. He checked the fireplace. It was empty and unused. No firewood nearby. He went to the kitchen.
The fridge was off. The stove was electric. No power. Mike opened the utility closet near the back door. Inside, he saw the heater unit. The front panel was removed. Wires hung loose. Someone had taken parts from it. Mike felt anger rise, quick and sharp, but he pushed it down. Anger would not help. He returned to the living room and pulled off his jacket.
He wrapped it around the elderly man's shoulders. "I know it's cold," he said. "This will help." The man looked at him, eyes struggling to focus. "Christmas," the man whispered. "We were waiting." Mike swallowed. Rusty shifted closer, resting his head near the man's knee. Mike went back to the hallway and took off his gloves. He adjusted the thin blanket around the woman and added a sweater he found on a chair. "Ma'am," he said. "What's your name?" "Evelyn," she said softly. "And your husband?" "George," Mike nodded. "I'm Mike. We're going to keep you warm." Evelyn looked at Rusty. "Dog," she said. "He's a good one," Mike replied. "His name is Rusty." Rusty lifted his head slightly, as if he understood. Mike stood and checked his phone. No signal. He wasn't surprised. He tried again near the window. Still nothing. Mike took a slow breath. He had been hoping to call emergency services right away. That wasn't going to work. He needed another plan. Mike moved around the house quickly but carefully. He closed doors to smaller rooms to reduce open space. He pulled blankets from closets and stacked them near the recliner and the bed. He checked the elderly man's pulse again. It was weak but steady. "You need to stay awake, George," Mike said. "Can you do that?" George nodded faintly. Rusty remained pressed against him, providing warmth and comfort. The dog did not move even when Mike stood up. Mike returned to Evelyn. Her breathing was uneven. She looked scared but was aware. "Do you have heart problems?" Mike asked. She nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "We're not going to rush you." Mike sat on the floor for a moment, thinking. The house was too cold. Even with blankets, they would not last the night. He could not fix the heater without parts. There was no power. He looked at Rusty. "Buddy," he said quietly. Rusty looked back at him. Mike knew what he had to do, even though he did not like it. He would have to move them. That would be dangerous. George was weak. Evelyn could barely stand. The snow outside was deep, and the storm was still active. But staying here was worse. Mike stood and went back to George. "George," he said clearly, "listen to me. This house isn't safe tonight. We need to go somewhere warmer." George's eyes moved slowly. "Evelyn?" he asked. "She's coming," Mike said. "I won't leave either of you." George nodded once. Mike returned to the hallway and knelt beside Evelyn. "We're going to move you," he said. "Not right this second. Slowly." Evelyn looked afraid. "I can't walk far," she said. "That's okay," Mike replied. "We'll figure it out." Rusty stood and walked between them, as if sensing the change. Mike looked around one last time. The house was quiet. Christmas lights blinked outside the window, faint and useless. Mike pulled his gloves back on. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's do this the safe way." Mike worked slowly and carefully. Rushing would only make things worse. He moved through the house again, checking what he could use. Most of the furniture was old and heavy. He ignored it. He needed light items, anything that could help with warmth or transport. In a storage closet near the back, he found a plastic sled. It was cracked along one edge, but still usable. There was also a coil of rope, a pair of worn gloves, and several thick blankets that smelled of dust, but were dry. Mike pulled the sled into the living room. "This will help," he said, mostly to himself. Rusty watched him closely, ears forward. Mike knelt beside George again. The old man's eyes were open now, but his face looked tight with pain. His breathing was still shallow. "George," Mike said, "we're going to move you first. I need you to stay with me, all right?" George nodded slowly. Mike wrapped George in 2 blankets and secured them gently with the rope, careful not to restrict his breathing. He adjusted the sled so George would lie flat and stable. Rusty stayed close, pressing his body against George's side while Mike worked. "Good boy," Mike said quietly. Next, Mike returned to Evelyn. She tried to sit up on her own, but stopped, wincing. "Easy," Mike said. "We'll take this slow." He helped her to a seated position, supporting her back. Her skin was cold, but she was still responsive. "I don't want to be trouble," Evelyn said weakly. "You're not," Mike replied. "Not even close." He wrapped Evelyn in layered blankets and helped her stand. Her legs shook immediately. Mike tightened his grip around her shoulders. "I've got you." Rusty moved to Evelyn's side and stayed there, steady and calm. Mike guided her toward the door, one step at a time. Each movement took effort. The cold seeped through the blankets quickly. At the doorway, Mike stopped. The wind outside was loud. Snow blew sideways across the porch. He adjusted his gloves and pulled his jacket tighter. "All right," he said. "We're going now." Mike pulled George's sled out first, guiding it carefully down the porch steps. Rusty stayed beside the sled, matching its movement. Once George was settled outside, Mike helped Evelyn onto the porch bench for a brief rest. Her breathing was fast, but she stayed conscious. "I see lights," she said faintly, pointing toward the trees. Mike followed her gaze. In the distance beyond the clearing, the faint glow of the main road reflected off the snow. It wasn't close, but it was reachable. "That's where we're headed," Mike said. He secured Evelyn onto the sled beside George, adjusting blankets and checking both of them again. "You're doing good," he said. "Both of you." George coughed, then nodded. Rusty stood at the front of the sled, leash clipped to his harness. Mike tied the rope securely. "You lead," Mike told him. Rusty stepped forward without hesitation. The snow was deeper than Mike expected. Every step took effort. His knee protested immediately, sharp pain running up his leg. He ignored it. The sled moved slowly but steadily behind Rusty. They made it 10 yards, then 20. Mike stopped to check George's breathing. Still there, weak but steady. "Okay," Mike said. "Keep going." The wind picked up. Snow stung Mike's face and found its way under his collar. His hands burned with cold despite the gloves. Rusty paused, sniffing the air, then adjusted direction slightly, choosing firmer ground. Mike trusted him. Minutes passed. It felt longer. Mike's breathing became heavy. His chest tightened with each breath. He slowed his pace but did not stop. At one point, his boot slipped on packed ice. He went down hard on one knee. Pain flared. He stayed still for a moment, teeth clenched. Rusty stopped immediately and turned back, barking once. "I'm okay," Mike said, forcing himself up. "I'm fine." He wasn't, but that didn't matter. They continued. Evelyn moaned softly. Mike leaned down and checked her face. "Stay with me," he said. "Talk to me if you can." "I used to bake cookies," she said weakly. "Every Christmas." Mike nodded. "What kind?" "Sugar cookies," she replied. "George liked them plain." George made a faint sound that might have been a laugh. Mike allowed himself a brief breath of relief. They reached the edge of the tree line. The road was closer now. Mike could hear the distant sound of wind hitting metal, maybe a signpost, maybe a vehicle far away. Rusty stopped again, sniffed, then barked twice. Mike looked ahead and saw the road more clearly now, covered in snow but open. "We're almost there," he said. The last stretch was the hardest. Mike's arms shook, his lungs burned. His knee felt unstable. He leaned forward into the pull, using his body weight to help the sled move. Rusty pulled harder, muscles working, steady and focused. Then Mike saw headlights. They were far away at first, faint through the snow. He stopped and raised one arm. Rusty barked sharply. The lights slowed. Mike waved again. The sled came to a stop at the edge of the road. Mike bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. He looked down at George and Evelyn. "You made it," he said quietly. The headlights grew brighter. Rusty stood alert at the front of the sled, tail high, watching the approaching vehicle. Mike straightened, forcing himself to stay upright. "Okay," he said softly. "Now we wait." The headlights slowed as they approached. Mike stood still at the edge of the road, one arm raised. Snow blew around him, covering his boots again almost immediately. The vehicle came closer, and Mike could now see what it was. A snowplow truck. It was large, orange, with flashing warning lights on top. The blade in front was lifted, not pushing snow, just moving carefully through the storm. The truck slowed to a stop a short distance away. The driver's door opened. A man stepped down, bundled in thick winter gear. He was tall, heavy-set, and moved carefully on the ice. His face was red from the cold. "Hey!" the man shouted over the wind. "What are you doing out here?" Mike waved him closer. "We need help," he said. "Two elderly people, hypothermia." The driver didn't hesitate. He hurried over and looked at the sled. "Jesus," he said quietly. "How long have they been out here?" "Too long," Mike replied. The man nodded and pulled out a radio. "I've got two elderly severe cold exposure," he said. "Christmas Eve, North Access Road. Need medical support now." Static answered first. Then a voice broke through. "Copy that. Ambulance is delayed, but we're sending a patrol unit and volunteer rescue." The driver looked at Mike. "Name's Tom Harris," he said. "County roads." Mike nodded. "Mike." Tom crouched beside George and checked his breathing. "He's alive," Tom said. "Barely. We need to get them out of the wind." Tom opened the side compartment of the truck and pulled out emergency blankets and a thermal wrap. He worked fast, covering George and Evelyn carefully. Rusty stayed close, watching every movement. When Tom stepped too near George's face, Rusty let out a low warning sound. "It's okay," Mike said. "He's protective." Tom nodded. "Smart dog." Tom helped Mike lift the sled closer to the truck. They positioned George first, then Evelyn, inside the sheltered area near the truck's rear wheel well. Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. "George?" she whispered. "I'm here," George said weakly. Mike felt a small release in his chest. Tom spoke into his radio again. "They're alive. Barely. We need heat now." Tom opened the passenger door and turned the heater on full blast. Warm air poured out. Mike leaned against the truck for a moment. His hands shook badly now. The adrenaline that had kept him moving was fading. "You need to sit," Tom said, noticing. "I'm fine," Mike replied automatically. Tom gave him a look. "Sit." Mike sat on the step of the truck. His knee throbbed. His chest felt tight. He took slow breaths. Rusty came over and pressed against his leg. Mike rested a hand on the dog's head. "Good job," he said quietly. Minutes passed. Then another set of headlights appeared through the snow. A sheriff's SUV pulled up, followed by a volunteer rescue truck. Doors opened. People moved quickly but carefully. A woman in a heavy medical coat approached. She knelt beside George and Evelyn, checking vitals. "We're going to move them to the ambulance as soon as it arrives," she said. "They're critical, but stable for now." Mike nodded. "Thank you." The woman looked at Mike. "You brought them out here?" "Yes." "In this storm?" "Yes." She studied him for a moment. "You probably saved their lives." Mike didn't answer. The wind continued to howl. Snow piled up against the vehicles. Tom came back and handed Mike a cup of hot coffee from a thermos. "Drink," he said. Mike took it. His hands shook so badly some spilled. "You should get checked too," Tom said. "You don't look good." Mike nodded but didn't respond. His vision felt slightly blurred now. Rusty barked suddenly and nudged Mike's leg hard. Mike tried to stand. His knee gave out. He went down hard onto the snow. "Mike!" Tom shouted. Hands grabbed his arms. Someone eased him back against the truck. "I'm okay," Mike said weakly, but he knew he wasn't. The cold had finally caught up with him. The last thing he felt was Rusty pressing his body against Mike's chest, refusing to move. "Stay," Mike whispered. Then everything went quiet. Mike woke up slowly. At first he did not know where he was. The air smelled clean, sharp, and unfamiliar. There was a steady beeping sound somewhere near his head. His body felt heavy, like it did not fully belong to him. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was white. Bright lights hummed softly. He tried to move his head but stopped when pain shot through his knee and chest. "Easy," a voice said. Mike turned his eyes toward the sound. A woman stood beside the bed, wearing blue scrubs and a thick sweater underneath. She looked tired but calm. "You're in Pine Ridge General Hospital," she said. "You had hypothermia and a mild collapse. You're safe." Mike swallowed. His throat felt dry. "The couple?" he asked. The nurse nodded. "George and Evelyn Miller. They're alive. In ICU, but stable." Mike closed his eyes for a moment. He let out a slow breath. "Thank you," he said. The nurse smiled faintly. "You're the one who deserves that." She adjusted a blanket over him. Mike noticed his clothes were gone. His knee was wrapped tightly. An IV line ran into his arm. "Your dog is fine," the nurse added, as if reading his thoughts. Mike opened his eyes again. "Rusty?" She pointed to the foot of the bed. Rusty lay there on a folded blanket, head resting on his paws. His eyes were open. When Mike looked at him, Rusty lifted his head and wagged his tail once. Mike felt his chest tighten, but this time not from cold. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. Rusty stood, walked closer, and rested his chin carefully on the mattress edge. He stayed there, still and quiet. "You scared him," the nurse said gently. "He wouldn't leave you." Mike nodded. That sounded right. The nurse checked the monitor once more. "You need to rest," she said. "A doctor will come by soon." She left the room. The hospital was quiet. Christmas decorations were taped to walls, paper snowflakes, a small tree near the nurse's station. Someone had placed a Santa hat on a coat rack. Mike stared at the ceiling. His body hurt everywhere. His knee throbbed steadily. His chest felt tight when he breathed too deeply. He knew the feeling. It would take days, maybe weeks to recover. He also knew what came next. Bills, missed work, lost income. Maybe eviction if things went bad. Mike closed his eyes again. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. A man in a long coat entered the room. He had gray hair and tired eyes. "I'm Dr. Allen," he said. "You gave us a scare." Mike nodded slightly. "How bad?" "Hypothermia, dehydration, stress on old injuries," the doctor said plainly. "You pushed your body too far." Mike did not argue. "You'll need to stay overnight," Dr. Allen continued. "Possibly longer for your knee." Mike looked toward Rusty. "He can stay?" Dr. Allen smiled. He already won that argument. Mike allowed himself a small smile. Later, a sheriff's deputy stopped by. He took a brief statement. Mike answered simply, without drama. "I saw the house," Mike said. "They needed help, that's all." The deputy nodded. "We're looking into what happened with their heater." Mike said nothing. As night passed, the hospital grew quieter. Outside, snow continued to fall. Sometime after midnight, the nurse returned. "Someone's here to see you," she said. Mike frowned. "I wasn't expecting anyone." The door opened again. An elderly man stepped in, supported by a nurse. George Miller looked weak but awake. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "Mike," George said. Mike tried to sit up. "You shouldn't—" George raised a hand. "Just a minute." George stepped closer to the bed. His voice shook slightly, but it was steady enough. "They told us what you did," George said. "You didn't have to." Mike looked away. "Yes, I did." George nodded. "Evelyn wanted me to tell you something." George reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded Christmas card. "We never finished it," he said. "But it's yours now." Mike hesitated, then took the card. "Thank you," he said quietly. George looked at Rusty and smiled. "And thank you too." Rusty wagged his tail. George stayed only a short while before the nurse guided him back. Mike held the card in his hands, but did not open it yet. Outside the window, snow fell softly under hospital lights. For the first time that night, Mike felt warm. Mike did not wake up all at once. Consciousness returned slowly, in pieces. First came sound, a steady beeping somewhere close, then light, soft but constant. His body felt heavy, like it had been pressed into the bed. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw a white ceiling. For a few seconds, he did not remember where he was. Then the cold, the snow, the road, and the sled came back in fragments. His knee throbbed. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around it. He tried to move. Pain answered immediately. "Easy," a voice said. Mike turned his eyes to the side. A nurse stood near the bed. She was middle-aged, with dark hair pulled back and lines around her eyes that suggested long shifts and little sleep. She watched him carefully, not alarmed, but alert. "You're in Pine Ridge General," she said. "You were brought in last night. Hypothermia, exhaustion." Mike swallowed. His throat was dry. "The couple," he said. His voice sounded weak to his own ears. "George and Evelyn." The nurse nodded. "They're alive. ICU, stable." Mike closed his eyes. He did not realize he had been holding his breath until he let it go. "Thank you," he said. She adjusted the blanket over him. "You should rest. Your body took a lot." Mike nodded slightly. She hesitated before leaving. "Your dog is here." Mike opened his eyes again. "Rusty?" She pointed to the corner of the room. Rusty lay on a folded hospital blanket near the wall. His body was curled, but his head was up. The moment Mike looked at him, Rusty stood and walked over. He placed his front paws carefully against the bed and rested his chin near Mike's arm. Mike lifted his hand slowly and touched the dog's head. Rusty stayed still. "He wouldn't leave," the nurse said. "We tried." Mike nodded. That sounded right. The nurse left. The room was quiet except for the machines. Mike stared at the ceiling again. His body hurt everywhere. His knee was wrapped tightly. An IV ran into his arm. His chest felt raw when he breathed too deeply. He knew these feelings well. Years of hard labor and old injuries did not disappear because someone wanted them to. He also knew what would come next. Bills, lost work, recovery time he could not afford. The weight of it settled on him slowly, heavier than the blankets. A doctor came later that morning. His name was Dr. Allen, a man in his late 50s, with gray hair and a calm manner. He spoke clearly and did not rush. "You pushed yourself too far," Dr. Allen said. Your knee injury is worse. Your lungs show stress. You're not 20 anymore. Mike did not argue. You'll stay here a few days, the doctor continued. Physical therapy will evaluate you. After that, we'll talk about next steps. Mike nodded. I need to work. Dr. Allen met his eyes. You need to heal. Mike looked away. Later that afternoon, a sheriff's deputy came to take a statement. Mike answered simply. He did not exaggerate. He did not dramatize. I saw a house, Mike said. It didn't look right. I checked. That's it? The deputy asked. That's it. The deputy nodded and left. As the day passed, Mike drifted in and out of sleep. Rusty stayed close, moving only when nurses came in. Each time someone touched Mike, Rusty watched their hands carefully. That night, snow fell again outside the hospital window. The next day, Mike woke feeling slightly clearer, still weak, but present. A physical therapist helped him sit up. His knee protested immediately. We'll take this slow, she said. You don't heal by forcing it. Mike clenched his jaw but followed instructions. Later that morning, a woman knocked softly and entered the room. She was in her early 40s, wore simple clothes, and carried a folder. Her posture was calm, her voice steady. My name is Linda Perez, she said. I'm a social worker here. Mike sighed quietly. I'm not looking for charity, he said. Linda nodded. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering options. She pulled a chair closer and sat down. We know your situation, she said. Limited income, physical labor, medical needs. Mike shifted slightly. Rusty looked at Linda but did not move. You can't go back to the same pace, Linda continued. Your body won't allow it. Mike stared at the wall. We can help with short-term assistance, Linda said. Medical coverage, physical therapy, temporary support. Mike shook his head. I don't take handouts. Linda did not react. You pulled 2 elderly people out of a frozen house on Christmas Eve, she said. You collapsed doing it. Accepting help doesn't erase that. Mike said nothing. Linda stood. Think about it. I'll come back. She left. That afternoon, another visitor came. Evelyn Miller entered slowly with the help of a nurse. She looked smaller than Mike remembered, but steadier. Her hair was neatly brushed. She wore a simple sweater and carried a small paper bag. Mike tried to sit up. Don't, Evelyn said gently. You've done enough. She moved closer to the bed. George is resting, she said. Doctors say he'll recover. Mike nodded. That's good. Evelyn looked at Rusty. Hello again, she said. Rusty stepped forward and allowed her to touch his head. She smiled. Evelyn opened the paper bag and took out a small container. I baked these, she said. Hospital rules, not many. Mike opened the lid. Sugar cookies, plain, he nodded. Thank you. Evelyn's eyes filled slightly. You didn't have to stop that night. Mike looked down. Yes, I did. She placed a hand on the bed rail. Most people don't. She stayed only a few minutes. Before leaving, she said, George wanted you to have this. She handed Mike a folded Christmas card. Mike held it, but did not open it yet. That night, when the room was quiet again, Mike opened the card. Inside, the handwriting was shaky but clear. Thank you for choosing not to walk away. Mike folded the card carefully and placed it in the drawer. 2 days later, Mike was discharged. A county volunteer drove him home. Rusty rode in the back seat, calm and alert. The trailer was cold but intact. When Mike stepped inside, he noticed something immediately. The heater was working. Warm air moved through the small space. Mike frowned. On the table lay a note. Fix the heater. No charge. Stay warm. Mike sat down slowly. Rusty lay at his feet. For the first time in a long while, Mike felt something unfamiliar. Relief. The days after Mike returned home passed differently than before. Time did not feel rushed anymore. It moved slowly, shaped by pain in his knee, scheduled exercises, and short walks that left him tired. Mike followed the doctor's instructions carefully, not because he enjoyed it, but because he understood now what happened when he ignored limits. Rusty adjusted without complaint. Each morning, Rusty waited by the door while Mike strapped on his knee brace. He did not pull when they walked. He stayed close, matching Mike's pace exactly. When Mike stopped, Rusty stopped. When Mike rested, Rusty sat beside him. Mike noticed these things, even if he did not comment on them. The trailer park was quiet that winter. Snowbanks lined the narrow roads, and most people stayed indoors. Mike did not work. That bothered him more than the pain. Work had always been how he measured his worth. Without it, His thoughts grew louder. One afternoon, someone knocked on the door. Mike frowned. Visitors were rare. When he opened it, Tom Harris stood outside, wearing his county road jacket. Snow clung to his boots. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Tom said. Mike shook his head. "No." Tom stepped inside and glanced around. "Heater's working." "Yeah," Mike said. "Someone fixed it." Tom smiled slightly. "Town's full of people who notice things." Tom pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to Mike. Mike opened it. It was a list of names, phone numbers, addresses. "These are people who asked about you," Tom said. "People you've helped, over the years." Mike stared at the paper. "I didn't keep track," Mike said. "They did," Tom replied. Tom shifted his weight. "There's a gathering tomorrow evening. Community hall, nothing official." "I don't do speeches," Mike said. Tom smiled. "Good. No one's asking for one." That evening, Mike sat alone at the small kitchen table. The paper lay in front of him. Names he recognized. A woman whose pipes froze 3 winters ago. A man whose heater died during a storm. A family whose power went out on Christmas morning years back. Mike had never thought much about those moments. He fixed what he could and moved on. Rusty rested his head on Mike's knee. "You think we should go?" Mike asked quietly. Rusty lifted his head and wagged his tail once. Mike sighed. "All right." The next evening, Mike put on his jacket and boots. His knee protested, but he ignored it. Rusty waited patiently as Mike clipped on the leash. The community hall sat near the center of town. It was old, built of brick and wood, with a simple sign above the door. Faint Christmas decorations still hung inside. Someone had left them up longer than usual. Mike stopped just inside the doorway. People were already there, maybe 20. Some standing, some seated in folding chairs. Conversations quieted when Mike entered. Mike felt uncomfortable, immediately. Rusty walked at his side, calm. Mike recognized George and Evelyn Miller near the front. George stood slowly when he saw Mike. "Please sit," Mike said quickly. George smiled and sat back down. No one clapped. No one stared. That helped. A woman stepped forward. Mike recognized her vaguely from town, but did not know her name. "We're not here to make this awkward," she said. "We just wanted to say thank you." She did not raise her voice. She did not exaggerate. She talked about winters in Pine Ridge, about how quickly things went wrong, about how people didn't always know who to call. Then she gestured toward Mike. "He stopped," she said simply, "when most people wouldn't have." Others spoke after her, short sentences. "Thank you. We remember. You helped my mother. You fixed our heater at midnight." Mike did not speak. Rusty lay at his feet, relaxed. When the room quieted again, Tom stepped forward. "We're putting together a winter response group," Tom said. "Nothing fancy, just people who know the town." He looked at Mike. "We could use your experience when you're able." Mike hesitated. "I can't do what I used to," he said. Tom nodded. "We don't need that." The meeting ended quietly. People talked in small groups. Someone handed Mike a cup of coffee. Another pressed an envelope into his hand. "For later," the man said. Mike nodded. Outside, snow fell lightly. Rusty walked beside him as they headed home. Inside the trailer, Mike opened the envelope. Inside was a check, not large, not small, enough to cover a few months of expenses. A note was attached. "For the work you already did. And the work you'll do when you're ready." Mike sat down heavily. Rusty rested his head on Mike's knee. Mike did not cry. He just sat there, breathing. The next weeks brought change, slow but steady. Mike attended physical therapy regularly. His knee improved gradually. He joined the winter response group in a limited role. He did inspections, phone calls, advice. Rusty went everywhere with him. People trusted Rusty. That surprised Mike at first. Children knelt to pet him. Elderly residents relaxed when Rusty lay nearby. Rusty seemed to understand when to stay back and when to move closer. Mike noticed that too. One afternoon, Mike received a call from Evelyn Miller. "The heater stopped," she said. "George says you'll know what to do." Mike grabbed his tools. When he arrived, George opened the door himself. He looked stronger now. "Good to see you," George said. Mike fixed the heater quickly. When warm air returned, Evelyn smiled and set a mug of tea on the table. "You're staying for dinner," she said. Mike hesitated, then nodded. They talked about simple things. Weather, town news. Rusty lay near the fireplace. Before Mike left, George handed him a folded paper. "We talked," George said. "We think it's time." Mike opened it later at home. It was a legal document, a deed transfer for a small guest house behind the Millers' property. Empty. Unused. Mike sat quietly for a long time. Rusty sat beside him. "You think this is real?" Mike asked. Rusty wagged his tail. Mike exhaled slowly. Winter did not end quickly that year. Snow stayed on the ground longer than usual, packed hard along the roads and piled high near houses. But something had changed in Pine Ridge. People checked on each other more often. They noticed things sooner. A light left on too long, a driveway that wasn't cleared. Mike noticed it too. He moved into the small guest house behind the Millers' property at the start of February. The house was old but solid. One bedroom, a small kitchen, a heater that worked properly. Mike fixed what needed fixing himself. New seals on the windows, reinforced steps, a handrail near the door. Rusty claimed the corner near the heater immediately. Mike did not rush anything. He still attended physical therapy twice a week. Some days were better than others. His knee ached in the cold, but it no longer felt unstable. His breathing improved slowly. He learned when to stop before exhaustion took over. That was new. Mike still rode his motorcycle, but not during storms anymore. He listened to his body now. That was new too. He stayed involved with the winter response group, mostly during daylight hours. He checked heaters, inspected insulation, helped coordinate rides for people who couldn't drive in snow. Rusty came with him every time. People trusted Rusty. They trusted Mike because Rusty trusted him. Children waved when they saw the dog. Elderly residents smiled and relaxed when Rusty lay near their feet. Rusty seemed to understand his role. He stayed calm. He watched quietly. Mike watched him in return. One afternoon in early March, Mike received a call from Linda Perez. "I heard you moved," she said. "Yes," Mike replied. "I also heard you didn't say thank you." Mike frowned slightly. "I didn't know what to say." Linda laughed softly. "That sounds like you." She paused. "I wanted to let you know your medical assistance was extended. Physical therapy approved through spring." Mike sat down slowly. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Linda said. "Sometimes people notice." Mike nodded. After the call, Mike sat quietly for a long time. Rusty rested his head on Mike's foot. "You did this," Mike said quietly to the dog. Rusty wagged his tail once. Spring came gradually. Snow melted unevenly, mud replaced ice, roads reopened fully, people emerged from their houses again. Mike helped when he could, he declined when he couldn't. No one argued with him about it. That surprised him. In late November, snow returned. Christmas decorations appeared around town. Simple lights, wreaths, a small tree near the community hall. Mike noticed them more this time. One evening, Evelyn Miller knocked on his door. "You're coming over," she said. "Christmas Eve, dinner." Mike hesitated. "I don't want to—" "You're coming," she said again. Mike nodded. On Christmas Eve, Mike walked across the yard with Rusty at his side. Snow fell, lightly. Warm light spilled from the Millers' windows. Inside, the house smelled like food and pine. George sat by the table. He looked stronger now, older, but steady. "You made it," George said. "Yes," Mike replied. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, potatoes, bread, nothing fancy. Rusty lay near the fireplace. After dinner, George cleared his throat. "We want to give you something," he said. Mike shook his head. "You already did." George smiled. "This isn't about repayment." George slid a small box across the table. Mike opened it. Inside was a key. "The guest house," Evelyn said. "Officially yours. No conditions." Mike stared at it. "I can't," he began. "You can," Evelyn said. "And you will." Mike closed the box slowly. "Thank you," he said. Later that night, Mike walked back to his house. Snow crunched under his boots. Rusty stayed close. Inside, Mike placed the key on the table. He sat down and looked around. The house was quiet, warm. He thought about the storm the year before, the road, the cold, the moment he almost didn't stop. He knew what would have happened if he hadn't. That night, Mike slept deeply. The next morning was Christmas Day. Mike woke early. Rusty sat at the foot of the bed, alert. Mike stood and stretched slowly. Outside, snow covered the ground evenly. Mike brewed coffee and stood by the window. He felt calm. Later that day, Mike walked to the community hall. Not because he was asked, because he wanted to. People greeted him simply. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." Rusty accepted attention quietly. Mike stood near the back of the room. He did not need to speak. He did not need recognition. He belonged. That evening, Mike returned home. He placed a small star on the shelf near the window. He did not know why. It just felt right. Rusty lay beside him. Outside, snow continued to fall, but this time, it did not feel dangerous. It felt quiet. Mike sat down and rested his hand on Rusty's back. "We're okay," Mike said. Rusty's tail thumped once, and for the first time in many years, Mike believed it. Sometimes, miracles don't come as signs in the sky. Sometimes, they come as ordinary people who choose to stop and help. On a cold Christmas night, there were no angels visible, but there was kindness where death was expected. Maybe that's how God still works in our lives. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and may God bless you and protect you, today and always.